Good afternoon, everyone. Caresoft Technology would like to welcome you to our Google Cloud webinar. Dive deeper into Google Cloud Dataprep by Trifacta and how it accelerates analytics. Just to tell you a little bit about Caresoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, and local government agencies. Caresoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors, including Google, F5, Adobe, and Red Hat. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please do not hesitate to call or email us for any of your needs. This webinar is being recorded and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to you. Please fill out the survey that I will link in the chat either during or after the webinar. At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Eric Clark, Program Manager at SpringML, and Brian Shealy, Vice President of Public Sector at Trifacta. Eric and Brian, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thanks so much, Harper. And thanks to everybody for carving out time today to join us for this webinar. I'm excited to talk to you today. My name's Eric. I'm joined with Brian Shealy from Trifacta. Brian, you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Sure. Hey, Eric. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm the Vice President of Public Sector for Trifacta. We are a software company. We're Silicon Valley based in San Francisco. We have a really unique relationship with Google. Caresoft is our distributor in public sector, and they've been a great partner for quite a long time. So my role is I'm responsible for driving effectively projects and new revenue across the entire public sector for North America for Trifacta. It happens to be our fastest growing market segment worldwide. So we've done a pretty good job as a team getting our message out there and having customers adopt our technology. Ultimately, what we are as a company is we focus on what's called self-service data preparation. What's unique about Trifacta and Google's relationship is we're a product that's been OEM'd by Google into the GCP offering. So Google Cloud Dataprep is Trifacta. We have a unique co-sell motion with the Google teams. And so you're going to learn a little bit about how that all works today, where Dataprep fits into the bigger GCP ecosystem, and I can kind of cover core differentiation of that offering versus other cloud providers if people are interested. But all in all, we've worked on projects with GCP. SpringML is doing a project with Dataprep, kind of driving it as a key component, and we fit nicely into the overall GCP ecosystem. So Eric, I'll let you kind of pick it up from there, talk a little about what you guys do, but I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Again, my name is Eric Clark. I'm an account director for Google Cloud Services with SpringML, focusing on public sector, and have been for the last 12 or so years. So SpringML, just a little bit about us. We're a professional services company, and we're a premier Google Cloud partner. And our key focus areas are on machine learning and artificial intelligence, modernizing analytics platforms, handling cloud migrations, and also application development. So excited to talk today about our perspective on where Dataprep fits into the overall kind of modern data analytics platform picture. And to kind of get started here, I want to start and end with sort of the same 3 points, key takeaways that we want to communicate today. The first is planning now for growth of your data. Deciding now how you're going to handle the growth of your data is going to be an important step, and we'll talk about why. Secondly, increasing trust and usefulness of your data. This is something organizations struggle with quite a bit, especially if you're pulling together data from multiple sources. In order to build that modern analytics platform, you've got to have a source and pull in the sources and make it trusted, make it useful for your organization. And then thirdly, and probably the most important point I wanted to communicate today as a takeaway, is the position of your data and how that matters for the future of your capabilities around advanced analytics. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about what positioning your data means here in a second. So our agenda is pretty simple today. We're going to talk about really kind of 3 things, then we'll go into a demo. I want to talk about data preparation challenges that we see, more traditional challenges that we've seen in the past as people try to understand their data and move it around and cleanse it and get it ready for actual production use. We'll take a look at Dataprep as a service and take a look at how it works. And then specifically how Dataprep accelerates your teams with regards to data wrangling and ultimately improving the quality of your data. We'll dive into a demo. That's the more exciting part probably, and then have some Q&A at the end. So you might be familiar with this statistic. This is something that as I've done presentations over the years, I keep tabs on what the IDC publishes about what they call the global data sphere. And it's about how fast we're assimilating and growing and amassing data. And right now the projection is, as of a couple years ago, that worldwide data growth will go to 175 zettabytes by 2025. You'll have to Google what a zettabyte is. Lots of zeros on the end of that number. But what's driving that? The adoption of cloud and how cheap storage is today, and the fact that we're amassing just a ton of data from IoT devices and wearables and other sources of health data for research and analytics, transactional data in retail settings, logistics and transportation data. We're able to collect and store more data more cheaply and more efficiently than ever before. And it's almost like an exponential growth curve. And maybe it's not a concern for you today, but we do need to be planning for how to handle this influx of data because it's just going to keep growing. And how do we make sense of it? How do we prepare it for advanced analytics use cases or for machine learning purposes? Or how do we use it to develop an artificial intelligence, right? So it's important to have a plan to address this massive amount of growth. Here's some challenges that we've seen in the past working, in my experience working on small and large scale information management type projects, analytics type projects. I've noticed some key challenges that organizations face with regard to data prep activities. So I want to compare and contrast some of these challenges with how data prep can actually solve these specific 5 challenges here. So first is they're not scalable. So sometimes, requiring a lot more capital expenditure up front to, deploy servers in a data center somewhere or pay for annual licensing, they can get pretty expensive and add up. In data prep's case, there's no servers to worry about. It's a service. So you turn it on, you can start using it immediately. It's going to scale both up and down with the usage, and you don't have to worry about it not scaling with your demand. Secondly, is they're not really intelligent, at least not as intelligent as data prep can be. So data prep provides, as soon as you start to connect your data to it, it provides automatic insights about the quality of your data. And it points you right to the places where you need to, apply some focus, and it gives you actually recommended action. It's got, recommended next steps on how to identify issues in your data and how to actually fix them with some intelligent recommendations. We'll see exactly how it works in the demo on that front. Traditional methods typically haven't been that fast either. And in Data Prep's UI, there's 2 really key components here. The user interface, being a web-based product, is really fast, responsive, but it's also very intuitive, which makes the learning curve a lot lower than other solutions. You don't have to go get a certification to know how to use Data Prep. You can just plug your data in, and it's intuitive enough for beginners to just kind of jump in and start using it right away. Fourthly, I've seen that typically the traditional methods are not inherently collaborative, and Data Prep allows you to share the flows that you build, to share the data sets that you add within Data Prep, to share the recipes and the cleansing logic that you create with your colleagues. You can definitely use it on your own individually, but the ability to share and collaborate on those things together is really important. And then finally, it's not really built for these traditional methods aren't built for the modern workforce. And what I mean by that is, the modern workforce is going to have a lot more what we call citizen developers that need to be empowered to take action on their data and do what they need to do. These are folks that, haven't gone to school for computer science and they don't need to, but they're close to the business and they understand the challenges of the business, and they do understand the data surrounding their business, their organization. And so they need to be empowered to handle the data, prepare the data, and get it ready for advanced use cases. And Dataprep does exactly that. It makes data wrangling accessible to those closest to the business need itself. And it doesn't require, a request into IT to spin up servers and installing this complex hardware. You're off to the races within minutes, really. And that's something that is really great about this solution. So those are
Eric,
the challenges and kind of, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, so a couple interesting points here, and I think that these are very, very well positioned and understood challenges for anybody that's worked on, I'll call it modern data projects, especially across the public sector. Sort of the pattern that we're seeing is this move to empower users to operationalize data more effectively and faster to achieve their analytics outcomes. And those analytics outcomes are driven obviously by policy, by organizational need, and also I think one of the obvious things that we're seeing with the pandemic over the last 12 to 15 months has been a lot of agencies haven't been ready to tackle large scale analytics. It's a major problem. So Trifacta as a company, we came out of a Stanford and Cal Berkeley joint project 7 years ago. And a lot of the things that Eric's just covered about scalability, intuitiveness, speed to, number one, to get your work done, speed to expedite your time to insight, the concept of collaboration in the modern design of working in data ops, all of those things were tackled because of the way that these folks at Stanford and Cal Berkeley solved the problem. They were living this in the world of big data. And I would say that the pattern we're seeing in public sector that's really expediting is most agencies at the state, local level, all the way up to the largest federal programs are trying to consolidate spend on tools, right? No one wants to spend unduly on tools. They don't want to spend tax dollars on it. They also want to unlock the data from the silos that it's in, which is an inherent problem in any large enterprise or large program. So the pattern has been this that we've been witnessing for the last 4 years in public sector, which is, number one, everybody is trying to unlock the power of data. So whether you're in the defense space and you've read the 2018 National Defense Strategy, where it's saying, hey, we've got competition for the future. We need to really field AI and ML faster. That's one way of thinking about analytics and expediting those analytics capabilities to market. Or if you're a municipal government organization and you've got data in a bunch of different systems and you're trying to do better predictive planning, in either case, whether it's a AI example on one side or a business intelligence example on the other, everybody is moving to cloud native architectures where they're trying to use compute and storage in a utility fashion, just like you consume your power, not having to build your own power plant to power your house. You just plug into the grid and get what you get. And they're ultimately trying to set up these collaborative, very, very robust, integrated tool stacks to enable users of different persona, different skill, and different business need to meet their analytics and big data needs in a timely fashion. And so Trifacta as a tool is definitely an enabling technology and a key part of the overall ecosystem. But these challenges, if you've ever lived any of these things, you'll understand that you can't just say, oh, well, that's just an ETL function, because the concept of ETL has massively changed. So looking for cloud native, fast capabilities to operationalize data across a myriad of users is what we see. And the move to these cloud native sort of shared service models is, again, over and over what we're seeing across the entire public sector. And the pandemic ultimately, regardless of what state you live in, the state of Maryland certainly doing it where I live. I know that the state of Washington is doing it. There's a bunch of others out there. They're really driven by the pandemic. They're trying to unlock a lot of different data and combine it with open source data and everything else, and have the ability to, in a very, very fast turn, figure out new analyses related to things like, what does the supply chain look like for goods and services related to the pandemic? Contact tracing, that's a massive data integration problem and analytics problem. So all of these things are sort of driving it. And I would say that GCP has a very unique packaging in the way they go to market. And as you kind of go through this, Eric, I think you'll keep hitting on some of these things that will be aha moments for folks that are wondering, well, why is Dataprep different? What value does it provide outside of my normal desktop ETL tool? And I think you'll touch on those things.
Yeah, great point, Brian. Thanks for chiming in on that. I think, this is a good kind of transition point to talk about this next point, as well as why does all that matter? And, at the end of the day, we all need to have clean and well formatted data, because that's what's going to drive up trust, and that's what's going to drive up the actual usability of the data. All those things that Brian just mentioned, that's what we're leading up to. And Dataprep is poised to handle just that, so that you can create and generate that clean and well formatted data quickly and easily, especially as you compare to prior ways of doing it, much quicker. But of course, this is true, right? This point is true, but given the amount of data that we're seeing that we're generating, right? Remember the 175 zettabytes by 2025, right? Coming from more and more sources, the number of sources are just going to keep growing, and the amount of data that we're going to be thinking about and processing and trying to make sense of is just going to continue to grow. And so we need to learn how to leverage it and understand it and use it to our advantage. And we don't want to be thinking about servers and managing IT infrastructure, right? To do that, that's exactly where Dataprep comes into the picture. So let's talk about what Dataprep is. And, I think I like the definition here: an intelligent data service to visually explore, clean, and prepare your data, structured and unstructured, to get it ready for analysis, reporting, and machine learning. Very simple. A key point here, though, is that it's serverless. And what that means is, again, like I mentioned previously, and Brian had on, is that there's no need to spin up servers. It's turn on the service and start consuming it right now. And that means that it's going to scale with whatever demand you put at it, and there's no infrastructure components here to worry about. And the other thing that's really interesting about it is that it intelligently suggests, it understands the data about your data, and it gives you meaningful suggestions for how to cleanse it, how to transform it into useful data on the analytics front. So, and no code, right? This is all, as you'll see in the demo, point and click, very intuitive user interface. Just think of it like this: a data preparation as a service, right? Plug it in and start using it right away. I do want to zoom out on this next slide and just talk briefly about where Dataprep fits in the bigger picture. And this is a Google Cloud specific services that you find in Google Cloud. But I do want to call out the fact that, if you're using AWS or Azure or any other public cloud, you can use Dataprep. It's not specific here to, you're not locked into using Google Cloud specifically. It's more open than that. So even though our focus at SpringML is building solutions as a Google Cloud Premier Partner on GCP, we often connect with other public clouds, and that's just fine. And it supports that. But from SpringML's perspective, I think it's important just to define what is, in this bigger picture of what a modern analytics platform is and looks like. We basically kind of describe that as a cloud native platform, as Brian mentioned earlier, that empowers people to advance their organization's analytics capabilities. That's what at the heart of this is. And that means by abstracting as much complexity out of the way as we can, so we can get to that business value from the data as quickly as possible. So again, you can, on this slide here, just the holistic kind of picture, you can string these products and services together to create that modern analytics platform. It's not that you have to use every single one of these services, but it's organized in a way from left to right that kind of shows, here's some example tools and services that you can use for data capture, ingesting data in. And then in the second one over from the left, the streaming and data pipeline, that's where Dataprep sits. And this is really about processing and cleansing and transforming your data so that it can be trusted and useful. And then over to the next one, data warehousing and data lake, that's just basically storing data. And then once you have it, in a place where you can store it, you can start layering on more advanced analytics, and there's really great products and services out there that you can leverage to start building ML models right away without having to have a data science degree. You can add in Google Cloud Auto ML, or you can add in reporting, right? From Data Studio or even partner BI tools like Looker and Tableau, Power BI, etc. So that's kind of our perspective on modern analytics platform and how we do it. And again, cloud native, all these things here are serverless, so we're not worried about that infrastructure as much as we are the application of what we're trying to do with the data. But I do want to talk about something really strategic in this whole conversation, and sort of a transformational concept, and that is about the position of your data. So this is one of the key points that I wanted to mention today is, and actually just ask, where is your data positioned? And when we think about where your data is positioned, is it disparate sources and unconnected? Is it living on antiquated software and hardware that can't meet the demands of that data growth that we talked about, can't meet the demands of the users as easily anymore? Is it still in the mainframe, right? You might even feel kind of vendor locked in some cases where you're heavily invested in some licensing and you feel like your hands are tied to move it. Where is your data positioned, right? Because it turns out when we think about building modern analytics platforms, the position of your data at the end of the day matters. It matters a lot, because what that does, the position of your data determines your ability to achieve the advanced analytics, like making predictions and doing forecasting. The position of your data also determines your ability to adopt machine learning and augmented intelligence capabilities. Position of your data also determines your ability to consolidate and connect the dots and make sure that you've got all of those data sources that might be disparate today connected so you get the full picture. And it also determines your ability to future-proof yourself by avoiding more vendor lock-in, creating that flexibility so that you could use the data the way that you need to. It's all about positioning. Where's your data? And that's why I've spent, along with SpringML the last several years, helping my public sector customers reposition their data, because it sets them up for a future of those types of use cases and not having to worry about scale as much, not having to worry about infrastructure and all those things, just so they can take better advantage, more full advantage of what the data is trying to tell them now. So Brian, I don't know if you have any quick thoughts on this before we transition over, but I want to talk about how Dataprep can help in positioning or repositioning data, but feel free to chime in if you've got any thoughts.
I mean, I think you've touched on the key things. Just one concept I always say to people when you're doing these kinds of projects is, when you get going on any analytics project, your goal may be to sort of newly position your data, unlock it from where it lives today, and figure out ways to integrate it together. But one of the things you should consider, I believe, is the key paradigm is build for agility, meaning what you start out trying to do with your data will evolve because you will get new insights once you start that journey. And one nice part about the packaging in GCP is, Google has a very unique way of looking at cloud services, in my opinion. It's not just infrastructure. It's not a commodity-based thing for storage and compute. They're real solutions that are tied together in under the hood, really well integrated and packaged way, so that as that agility becomes a requirement, say you start out, hey, we just want decision support, and we need to unlock data from various siloed systems of record, and you start populating it into Google Cloud Storage or co-locating it into BigQuery for data warehousing, etc. What you're going to find is over time, other projects will be coming online, and they'll have the ability to leverage that data. And the nice part about the approach there is all of this stuff is interconnected around the storage of the data, but it gives you really, truly, as self-service oriented as possible, a nice architecture that truly is scalable, agile, API oriented, and in many cases, it can be your centerpiece for even a strategy that is connecting to on-prem and multi-cloud data. So I think there's really good positioning there, all pun intended, on helping you reposition your data with the right tool stack in GCP, which is a unique packaging.
Yeah, that's awesome, Brian. Thanks. couldn't agree more. I think let's transition this a little bit. I want to just talk more now about, let's get into the specifics of data prep and kind of lead up to this demo. So how does data prep fit in terms of positioning or repositioning data? It plays a key role here. So let's talk about how it works. So this is a picture, from left to right, kind of similar to the one I shared earlier, where, we have on the left hand where you're getting the data from, ingestion methods, and in the middle, how you're preparing it, storing it, processing it. And then on the far right side, you're talking about, that's the analysis layer, that's the machine learning use cases and so forth. So from left to right. And I'll give a specific example of how how we use this in a very specific example just last week, which was really kind of a cool story. But once the data, is in the cloud, we call cloud storage, for example, kind of a landing zone area, right? You can load your data there in object storage. It could be a flat file, it could be, something easy to upload, but then you can connect data prep right away. And then Dataflow is there to kind of process and move data to its eventual target location, which could be BigQuery or cloud storage. And then you can start layering on these analysis tools. I do want to mention that, although, things like S3 from AWS aren't mentioned here, I mean, that's a valid source, right? So, it doesn't have to be just GCP technology here in this mix. Let me go to this slide here and just talk briefly about how we see data prep being used. So in that kind of flow of data from, connecting to sources, cleansing it, processing it, to ultimate, usage of the cleansed data, we see kind of 5 key things here, right? Preparing the data for machine learning modeling. Turns out with machine learning, you need well-prepared, very clean data to have accurate models, right? So data prep definitely has a use case there in creating and standardizing data to make it useful for machine learning. We see it used in combining multiple data sources, and this could be everything that we saw on that last slide. It could be flat files that you load into storage, cloud storage location. It could be from spreadsheets. It could be from other databases, other data lakes, other warehouses. It could be from applications, right? But joining them together is where that magic starts to happen, and you can start to enrich your data pipeline, enrich the data, and bring it through kind of this pipeline concept and clean it and load it into its eventual target. We also see data prep used here for quickly understanding the data about your data. So being able to profile your data, visually inspect it, and see, charts and quality bars, and determine right away what mismatches in my data do I have. You can see those things visually and start to click around in data prep and address those issues very quickly. You'll see that in the demo here coming up. Sharing and collaborating on flows. Again, this is something that, more traditional tools, you're probably working more individually. But with data prep, you can actually build out your flows. Think of a flow as a container that has, your source data, could be multiple sources, and then recipes, which are the kind of transformational things that you're doing to clean the data, and then output. But having the ability to share those flows with your team is really empowering. And so we love to see teams use it for that. And then finally, just altogether, the components of a flow can be scheduled, and you don't have to code anything here, right? So if I build a flow and it takes data from sources, transforms it, cleans it, gets all of those things ready for me, I can actually schedule that to load into my target on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever the schedule might be. So very, very powerful options at your fingertip. And I wanted to give a very specific example of a request that came in actually last week. So we had a customer that we've been working with interested in exploring moving off of Oracle. And, so we're talking about this, and he sends a 40 gigabyte export from their Oracle database that has a bunch of air quality data in it. And so it's 40 gigabytes in a CSV format. It contains about 35 million records, and the data set is very wide. So imagine opening a spreadsheet with 304 columns. Where do you start? So there's kind of an old way of doing this. I could maybe carve off a piece of that 40 gigs because, good luck opening a 40 gig CSV on your desktop. I might be writing some regular expressions or trying to do some other things manually to understand the data and figure out what's in there and what do I need to do before I can make it useful. And before you know it, that adds up, takes time. But better way is, again, positioning your data. Think about this. The first thing we did is we moved that 40 gig file to Google Cloud Storage. We positioned the data, right? And it's in a raw form, right? But because it was there, all we had to do was point Dataprep to that 40 gig file. Dataprep reads it, samples it, and we could immediately start interacting with it and see information about the data. And instead, within less than 2 days, we had understood the data, all that 40 gig file. We knew the schema, we knew the issues we needed to fix, and we had it loaded into BigQuery, the alternative data warehouse in this case, in less than 2 days. Really cool story. And this is how that flowed, right? Back to that chart that I shared earlier with ingestion and processing, and then on the analysis and ML side, right? Landed in cloud storage, use Dataprep to understand it, run the job, which kicks off Dataflow. Dataflow loads the data, the cleansed data into BigQuery. And then we just pointed Data Studio at BigQuery and started to build some reports to make to start to understand it. So that's an example pipeline. That's an example kind of way to use Dataprep in the mix of that whole pipeline. All right. Hey, Brian, any other further thoughts here before I jump into the demo or as I get that prepared?
No. Well, if it's going to take you a second to get it prepared or so, I can give a thought. But yeah, you're ready to go. I think people want to see the goods.
Let's show them the goods here. Yeah. We've talked enough, so I want to flip over and show you Dataprep. First thing I'm going to show you, what you'll see on my screen here, hopefully that's visible, is Google Cloud Platform. I'm just in the home page here of a demo project I use for webinars and other demos. So, and I want to just share that the data we're going to look at today is fictitious, guys. It's I've already loaded before here in advance a couple CSV files that Brian shared with me just yesterday, and the sample files have like a fictitious bank customer information, about 10,000 customers, and also some loan information in 2 different sources. And so I'm going to walk through how to load that data in Dataprep, how to profile it and understand it, a couple cleaning things that we need to do to fix some issues in the data, and then how to join these 2, the loan information with the customer information together, and then generate a single output. So here I am in GCP, and this is probably a good area or a good spot in the webinar to mention that, if you go out and sign up for Google Cloud, you can actually get a $300 credit from Google just to kind of test anything out. All you need to do is sign up with a Google account for free, and you'll get some credits added to your account to go play around. So when I show you Dataprep today, that's definitely something you could do. You can follow after me and spin up your own Dataprep demo and start using it today. But from the console here, what I want to do is go to the menu in the upper left, and I can find Dataprep if I just go down to the big data section. Long list of kind of products and services here in Google Cloud Platform, but you can see Dataprep is right there. Or what you can do is just type in the search bar Dataprep, and you can get to it from there. So I've already got it up on a separate tab, so I just switched over. And this is the first thing that you'll see. So when you launch Dataprep, this is the interface that you'll see. And I want to give a quick tutorial of the user interface before we dive into, building out this flow and doing some cleansing rules and things like that. So the really 3 components here to call out. The first is that you've got this section for flows. And flows are basically containers that have source data added to them. They contain the recipes that do all the cleansing. And then the output. So think of it like a data pipeline. A flow is like a data pipeline. And then we have library. So library, if you import data sets here, again, from multiple locations, could be CSVs that you manually add here, or CSVs and S3 buckets or cloud storage buckets, or data coming from third-party applications, right? You can have all of your connected data here in the library so that you could use those in flows. And then thirdly, you have job history. So if you run a flow and the flow loads data into a spot, you can come back here, look at the job history, and get information about the recent jobs that have run, either manually or automatically. But back to the home screen. So when you log in, right, first thing we need to do is import data. So you can see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a button to import the data. And I've already done this, but I want to show it anyway. All I did to import those two files was I had them in Google Cloud Storage. So all I really needed to do here was find my storage bucket and then select those two files that I was interested in. And so you can see I've got a couple here. There's member info CSV and member loans. If I just select member info, for example, I get a preview right away of the data. So I can start to see right away what's in that CSV file. And you notice here that these little icons represent the schema. That's something intelligently right off the bat, the Dataprep has already determined what's the schema of this file. Without me having to do anything, I can just kind of browse and see. So of course, I've already added this data so we can use it in a flow right away. And so that's what I'm going to do is back out of that. But it's easy to import data in. You just hit import data and follow the prompts there, and you're good to go. So I actually want to go to my library since I have already added these. And I'm going to start with the member info CSV. And there's a little more button over towards the right. And if I click on use in new flow, this is basically going to say, let's use that data source and create a new flow with it. And when this loads, we'll start to see the data load, because the next step here, right, after I import the data is I need to start to make sense of it, right? I need to see what's in here and start to figure out where my problem areas are. And if you look at this, it looks very similar to a spreadsheet, very familiar user interface, but it's got some really interesting things at the top, right? I can see all my columns here, the column titles from that file. And then you can start to see some red here. What this is giving me is each bar right underneath the column name is what we call a quality bar. And when there's red, you want to pay attention to that. So this is saying to me that in this column for employee start date, there's 863 mismatch values, and if you're looking at the data, you can probably point that out right now, right? The dates are not all the same format. So I'm immediately in my data, and the first thing I'm noticing there is, hey, there's a quality issue on that one column. Let's figure out how to fix this, right? So what I can do here is select the entire column just by clicking on the header, and it opens up a little bit more detailed information about that column. So I can see, how many valid and mismatched values there are, breakdown of percentage. You can see number of unique values, the distribution of those values, and different patterns that Dataprep has identified in the data. And one other interesting thing you can do here is that even if you just clicked on the mismatch values here in that quality bar, Dataprep will highlight for you those values that it thinks are mismatched. And you can see over here on the right, it's suggesting already, here's some things that you can do to fix that. And it's just kind of guiding me to those to the details I need to know to figure out how to fix this. So I'm going to go back here to just open up the details about the column, and I'm going to go to show pattern details, and this opens up just a little bit more of a overall view of what's going on with my data. And I can see there's 3 distinct patterns here. There's the pattern here that's month, day, and year. And most of the values, almost 7,000 records fall into that. And then the next one is just a month, day, and 2-digit year. And then I've got, 4-digit year, month abbreviation, and so forth. I actually want them all to be standardized into this top one. That's what most of them are anyway, and I like that format. So if I just click that pattern, again on the right, it's giving me options, suggestions. And I know that if I hover over these, I can see kind of a preview of how Dataprep would handle this transformation. So if I go down to convert, because that's what I'm interested in doing, and it's actually this first one that I want, you can see here, it's going to change the format. It's going to convert the format. It's telling me, hey, what you need is, if you want it to be all the same format in that month, day, year, this is the step you can take. And I can quickly just select that transformational conversion, add, and that is my first step in my recipe. So the recipe, again, are just the steps that we need to take to clean and prepare the data. All right, so now all my values are matching. There's just one pattern here, and that's great. So if I go back to the data and we look again at employee start date, you see that the quality issue is now gone. So I've got all valid values in this column. All right, let's go on to the next one and quickly figure out how to fix up our annual income. I can see a data issue here. I'm going to take a little bit different route. It looks like what we've got here is, let me do a column details. You can see here just a little bit more information, kind of similar to the details pane you get on the right. But if I close that and we just look at it this way, almost 100% valid values, but we've got a few that are mismatched for some reason. So we're going to figure those out. But it's also telling me some interesting things too, like how many outliers do I have in this data? And, what are my top values? And even some statistics really quickly about the data. Got someone here making 6.1 million. Great for that person. You can see mismatched values. And I don't know if you've caught it here, but most of these values are just integers. And the mismatch values, a very small percentage, are all floats or they have decimals, right? But for the purpose of this annual income, we just want a rounded, nice rounded number. So I'm going to go back to the patterns tab here and just kind of quickly understand what I've got. I've got a lot of them that are 5 digits, some that are 6, some that have decimals, and then, a 7-digit and so forth. I just want the digits, no decimals. So again, select the pattern that interests me the most or the one that I think we need here. And I get my suggestions again. And this first option under set is already built the logic for me to automatically convert all of those decimals over to rounded integers. And I can simply add that to my recipe. And we are good. Now all those decimals are gone. And we're good to go with the annual income. So one thing I want to do is show, so far we've looked at this spreadsheet view, which is incredibly helpful. But sometimes when you have really, really wide formats, 50 columns or more, you can go to this column view here and just see, your quality bars by column. And you can tell the schema types as well here. So if you notice here, employee title, I don't know, it's kind of hard to see, but at the very edge, you can see this gray bar in our quality bar. So most of it's green, but some of it is missing values, right? So it's good to call that out. But for me, I'm good with that, right? I expect that we're probably going to be missing some values. So nothing to really address there. I'll just let that go. So that's a column view, but I want to go back. There's one more field I need to fix up here, and then we'll join the other data set and start to wrap it up. So if I go to the very end of my data set, you'll see this column called FICO, NUM, payment, agency. And what's really in here is a delimited set of data, right? It's not really nested, but it kind of is in the way that it's structured. It's not helpful though for reporting. If you're going to report on that, it's not going to be meaningful at all. So I need to take a couple steps here because there's a leading backslash. There's separated by backslashes as well. And just by interacting with the data and simply highlighting that first backslash, Dataprep will realize what I'm trying to do and give me a preview of the suggested actions, right? And I do want to replace that first one and just essentially remove it. So I'm going to add that to my recipe. And now that that's gone, that's great, but I still have these values that need to be separated out. So I'm just going to highlight that next backslash. And the first suggestion here also is very good. I want to split on those values, and it's giving me a preview before I even make any changes, what that's going to look like if I were to take this suggestion and split it. So I'll add that to the recipe as well. There we go. Now I've got this data split out in a more usable format, but I don't like the name for these columns. So let's rename those really quick. And as I rename these, they're just basically becoming another rule in my recipe. So we'll name this one number or num. It becomes payment. I'll spell it out just because the other fields are spelled out. And my last one is agency, but that really needs to be called credit agency. Right. So I just added quickly another 4 rules to my recipe. Now I've got 8 steps in this recipe that if I read in this file, a new one comes in tomorrow, same format, I can process these rules, this recipe on the same formatted file and clean everything up in a more usable way. There's one more thing I want to do though in credit agency. I see, D&B, Duns and Bradford, I don't really like the lowercase. So that's another thing I can do. Just right click and change the format here to proper case. Again, it's going to give me a preview so I can see that it's looking much better now. Just looks a little bit more professional that way. So we'll add that recipe as well. Okay, there we go. So I've got my recipe on member info. I've done a lot of cleaning here. It took 5 or so minutes, but I have a standardized clean data set with no more issues. So what I want to do now really quickly, and then we'll wrap up, is, and here's the flow view, which we haven't really looked at. So this is going to show you the source and your recipe. I'm going to add quickly here another data set. Again, if you remember, we had 2 CSVs, one with member info and one with the loan information. So to this flow, I'm going to add another data set. And then my next action here is to join these 2 together. So we'll add a join. What Dataprep will do is it'll look at these 2 files and try to determine what can I match on. And in this case, we do have a unique column between these two files, and that's the member ID. So it should recognize that. Yep. So it identified that as my join key to join the 2 data sets. I'm going to accept an inner join and simply just kind of enrich my data very quickly here between the 2 sources and add into my loan information details about this member's annual income, zip code. Let's take the FICO score and whether or not they own a home. Let's take those 4. Right, add to the recipe. And as that adds to this recipe here, I can kind of visually make more sense of how this data is flowing from source to recipe. And my one last action here would be to add this to some sort of output, right? So I want to create an output with this flow of data. So all I have to do is click that, and I can select multiple places to put this. In this case, I'll just do something really simple for the sake of demonstration and say that, I want to take this data flow and put it in a storage bucket and, call that file a certain name. Maybe I'll rename that, just hit edit on this destination window, and we'll call this We'll call this file the merged version. Notice here you can change formats. You can append files. You can create new files every time this job runs, and get even more detailed with even compression or splitting into multiple files. I'm just going to take the defaults for now. And that's it. So I can save these settings. I'm good with this. And now what I have is it's going to take me back to the overall flow, and I can see my source data, my recipes, and my eventual output here. And then I can run this. And so when you select run, you basically see the same information you did before, but all you have to do is hit run. And in the background, what that does is it spins up a bunch of workers. So there's infrastructure happening here, but it's abstracted, right? You don't have to worry about it. It will just run and load the data to whatever destination that you selected. So I know we're running low on time here, and I want to make sure we have time for questions while this runs here, but I'll flip back to our slides and have our key takeaways, and then we can take Q&A.
Nice job, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian and Eric. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to add those to the chat section. We do have one question so far. So what are the main differences between the different editions of Dataprep?
Sure, I'll take that one. So hey Bailey, thanks for the question. So the way that it's packaged up on GCP is there's like core base functionality. And then as you kind of go up in value, or obviously cost, there's additional feature functions. So there's things like additional connectivity, robust enterprise security as you kind of go up the levels. What I would recommend is engage your Google rep or talk to Carahsoft, talk to SpringML. If you're engaged with them, they can certainly Sherpa you to the right people to give you the answers. What I would encourage you to do is if you have questions about potentially using the tool in a project, Google does a fantastic job, I can tell you as a cloud provider, with their customer engineers, really being able to guide you and help answer those questions on what's the right tool for you. And what's nice about their subscription models is you can go up, back, so you can start small and go bigger, or vice versa generally. And I would highly encourage you to talk to them. We can give you specifics on that. If you want to engage us, feel free to drop an email to Carahsoft afterwards. They'll get you in touch with us for a specific conversation, Bailey, with your needs, and we'll address those answers. But again, it's feature function. It's generally listed on their site, but think of it like the highest level is what we call enterprise version. And that has like really robust security integration and things like that you would need for like an enterprise class project. Good question. Yeah. So another question here: what's the relationship with Trifacta and the advantages does this create for GCP customers? Yeah, I'll take this one, and then Eric and I don't know, Dan Nobleman, if you want to comment as well. But the relationship between Google and Trifacta is kind of unique. Trifacta, the company, my company behind Dataprep, a couple years ago, it was set up as an OEM relationship, meaning Google, as an innovative company, looked at the market space for data preparation tools, looked at what was out there, and typically Google they'll either buy a company for a core technology or they'll build it themselves because they have very stringent requirements, primarily in user experience, and then innovation and going to the market. Google doesn't do things like other companies. They're very, very innovative. When they looked at the market, they looked at Trifacta as part of their market study and realized they would just build Trifacta anyway. So we struck an agreement for an OEM relationship, meaning they licensed it into the platform. And that relationship largely is still true. And what that means is the packaging is Trifacta, i.e. Google Dataprep, is a native service. We co-sell along with Google's team. So generally what happens when people have a data prep need, in the public sector, they'll engage your team, and that team has reach back, and effectively Trifacta's teams act as overlays specific to data prep, supporting the Google cloud teams out there. So the advantage really is packaging, simplicity. If you have a Google contract, generally you can consume data prep today. And then if you have a unique need and there's a unique version or something like that you need, we can package things together and do private offers like custom offers effectively through your marketplace as well. So I don't know if Dan or Eric have any comments there as well, but that's the uniqueness of the way that it's packaged up.
No, you said that perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, great. We have another question from the chat.
Yep.
Does Trifacta see any of the data that's processed with Dataprep?
Yeah, great question. I know we're coming short on time. The answer is no, we do not. In fact, the Trifacta service itself, so the design of Trifacta, when Eric was describing it, the whole point of Trifacta and Dataprep is when we set out as a company to do this, and I've only been here a couple of years, but when the guys that founded the company, the concept of building a self-service data prep tool that's low code and intuitive is what we're really doing is we're bringing machine learning to the data itself to recognize pattern and type of the data, and then power recommendation engines, i.e. recommendations to the user in the UI for what you can do to the data. And to do that, there's a couple things that are going on there. One is the Trifacta service or data prep does not persist anything at all. Even if you have large sets of data, the way that it works is it takes an intelligent sample of the source data, holds it effectively in memory, so it's never persisted. And then once that data is presented in the browser, when you see Eric building up the recipe within the flow, you get that real-time feedback, what we call predictive transformation. So Trifacta only gets a metadata representation in memory. There's no persistence of it, so we don't see any of the data that's processed. So if you're using sensitive data or customer-specific data, et cetera, that's a security thing that was accomplished in the architecture. I'm sure Dan and Eric have a whole bunch of other comments there around the way that Google packages that functionality and some of the benefits of GCP's approach to security and ensuring that you know your data is secure and privatized accordingly. So hopefully, Bailey, that answered the question at a high level. A great question.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. And we are just about at time. If everyone could take a moment to fill out the survey, that would be greatly appreciated. I just added it to the chat again. I want to thank all of our participants, as well as Eric and Brian, for being with us today. We hope our webinar has been helpful for you and your organization. Brian, if you could just move to that last slide there. Thank you. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact Tiara Brooks at Carahsoft. Her contact information is displayed on your screen, so please don't hesitate to call or email her. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Nice job, Eric. Have a great day, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.